You found product market fit, but now the systems are cracking. The team needs you for everything. Growth feels like quicksand. The more you move, the deeper it pulls you in. This is the scaling paradox, where founders and operators come to get unstuck. I'm Blake Moseni, and I sit down with founders and operators that nearly burnt out and rebuilt their business to operate without them. If you're stuck in the middle, this is where we fix it. So the tweet is, realizing my biggest bottleneck is me. Last year's playbook won't cut it now. I'm uncomfortable growing, learning to communicate better, letting go of ego, showing up more consistently. There's one of the C's. And it's hard, but it's necessary.
I found this kind of renewed enthusiasm and kind of excitedness to be like, oh, that's the problem I'm trying to solve for right now. And I'll be very clear what the problem I'm trying to solve is. I believe everyone has a story, and I'm trying to unlock communication digitally for them to tell their story.
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Scaling Paradox. I am so excited to have all of you on listening in to hear about the GOAT of Shopify sales, Chris Lang, the co-founder of Fresh Chile, a top 1% Shopify brand that grew from his home kitchen to an overall nationwide business. This story is built on story, community, and Hatch Chili, and he's turned his family recipe into a multi-million-dollar brand. This is the story. These are the types of stories that you dream about. It feels like the American dream, and just so excited to be sitting here with you today, Chris, and learning more about your brand and how you've built it over the years.
Oh man, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm excited to share the story.
Absolutely. Before we get into any of the details about the business, metrics, and some of the other things that some of our listeners might be interested in, I feel like it's good to give everyone an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about. It's a Saturday morning. I want you to picture this. It's Saturday, and maybe it's a unique Saturday for you because I was checking out your Twitter. It sounds like sometimes you work on Saturdays, and you're not, and you're not working on this Saturday. What are you doing, and who are you around?
Oh man, my family always. I had a really like kind of traumatic childhood in a lot of ways,
Sure.
and so family is like where I'm not the kind of guy who's just always like, you know, um, I know I show up online every day, but like literally like I'm kind of a 9 to 5 kind of guy, and I just kind of
Sure.
go home to my family and
Hmm.
and that's where I kind of just live. And so like the perfect Saturday morning is like wake up, go on a walk with my family, play with the dogs, and just kind of kick back and make a late brunch. Like that's kind of like that's like heaven for me, which I haven't
I
done a
love
lot
that.
of,
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur. But I think I did have that moment this past Saturday, which I'm really thankful for.
That's spectacular. Was there like some breakfast tacos with some fresh chili over the top? I gotta ask. I know I sound cheesy, but I gotta
No,
ask.
but people ask all the time, and like,
Yeah.
yes, it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner around here, So like, salsa on the eggs, salsa, and the burritos. But yeah, I have my recipe on our website of like, kind of how I like to cook breakfast burritos, and so, I like to do a little potato, sausage,
Ooh.
egg, and then add green chili to it, and yeah, just kind of lasts for a couple days because that's how you want it. Because there's nothing like um like leftover burritos for the next morning. Like when you
Dude,
wake up the
yes.
next morning, like, oh, I got some more.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you heat it up on the plancha, So like it's really great.
What's a plancha? Because I was
Oh,
gonna
like
just.
stove top. Yeah,
Okay, I gotcha. I gotcha.
yeah, like on the oven. Yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah,
a little
'cause I
griddle.
was gonna say the ultimate hack that I've seen is the air fryer. That's personally for a burrito reheat. I'm a big fan of
Yeah,
the throwing it into the air fryer for a couple minutes.
that's a good tip. I don't do that. I should try
There you
that.
go. There you go, man. Well, that sounds spectacular, and I think it's so great to hear that that's how you would spend the time because it feels so authentic to your overall story in general. Like
Mhm.
building a business on top of a family recipe and being able to scale that to
Mhm.
one of the bigger Shopify brands in the world is a
Mhm.
really unique and aligns with kind of the ethos of who you are.
Mhm.
I think it would be good for the listeners to get a better understanding of okay, top 1% of Shopify. What does that actually mean? So
Yeah.
if you were pitching the listeners, and of
Yeah.
how would you describe Fresh Chile? Where are you guys at from a metric standpoint in terms of whatever you're willing to share for
Yeah.
them to get an idea of what your role is and what the numbers look like?
Yeah, I share a post every Monday that I share with my partner and our accounting team. And the only thing I leave out of the post now is our advertising dollars because it almost started to feel like a flex, and
Mm-hmm.
not, and then started getting a lot of follows and pitches, obviously. Like,
Yeah, of course.
you're spending how much on ads?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
talk to you. And so, yes, and so, we'll do $10 million this year, and we're 90% Shopify.
Wow,
And
that's amazing.
that's kind of like where we're at. And so what that kind of looks like, and some of the numbers that I track, and I think this was sort of a big shift. I think when I started posting my numbers, I I wasn't really doing it to like flex. I was doing it to kind of seek for answers because in
Mm,
early last year, like remember when Meta and Google started to not mostly Meta, I think around February, January, started to just kind of get a little wonky, and it's just like what's happening here. So I just kind of was like, I'm gonna post, what percentage we're up or down. I'm gonna post our advertising dollars, our ROAS, our MER, and our website conversion. That's now evolved to where I post about like website visitors, um, how many memberships we have, how many subscriptions we have. I really try to go through the list, but it's also a way for people to like when a lot of people kind of like get in my DMs, kind of ask for help. It's just like, man, are you tracking your numbers?
mm,
It's just like again, what gets tracked gets measured, and I just feel like why I still continue to post is almost to hold myself accountable, and I feel like that building in public has actually forced me to be a better, operator, better marketer, um, and not to lose sight of the focus because I am involved in a few different businesses. They
sure.
all complement each other, but the reality of it is that it's also you don't want to lose focus. You don't want to lose
Hmm.
sight because you do have a lot of operators who start to kind of dabble in different businesses and they kind of lose sight and oh, why is my business suffering? Well, you're not
Hmm.
looking at the numbers anymore. You're off focusing on something else.
I think that's a really interesting breakdown. I do want to pull on that thread a little bit
Yeah.
because, to your point, most entrepreneurs that are successful in one space
Mhm.
become serial entrepreneurs in other spaces.
Yeah.
Like part of the what I would call it the curse of an entrepreneur's mind
Yeah.
is you almost have what I would call the Midas mind, where it's like
Yeah.
you can see gold everywhere. It's not so much
Right.
you're touching gold, but you can see potential gold everywhere, and you
And
want to run in so many different directions and chase it down.
yeah.
And the most successful entrepreneurs, as you very well said, are very
Mhm.
clear. They have a target,
Right.
they have a mission that they're chasing down. And
Right.
so I guess specific to Fresh Chili, you have some metrics and some numbers in your building public, which
Yeah.
is the accountability mechanism that
Right.
you've created for yourself to be focused there. How are
Right.
you staying focused in some of the other orthogonal areas that you are supporting as well too? Is it same sort of structure? You have some key metrics that you're being held accountable to. Like, how are
Yeah.
you balancing the load?
Yeah. So I say that from a lot of experience. If,
Mm,
over the last 5 years, I've owned a restaurant, I've owned Airbnb, coffee shop, winery, um, real estate magazine. And so
mm,
again, like I wasn't focused. Again, I saw gold everywhere. My partner did too, and started to kind of chase down like different avenues. But I got really burnt out. I went through depression. Really kind of found my way out of it by seeking clarity. And so now, like, I'm involved in like agency, you know, Shopify brand, and like SaaS, which is
mm,
send link, which is email and SMS marketing. And each one of those, I'm solving the same problem. I'm
mm,
ultimately, I'm in the story business.
mm,
Number one, I'm in the story business, and then number two, I'm in the communication, online communication business. So for like, if you think of the agency, we really focus on our organic social,
Mm,
and and then there's some light email and SMS in there too. So it's about communication. Same thing with Fresh Chile. I would say, like, now that the team is built out, we have a GM, we got a kitchen staff, we got a shipping department. Like that, it's been built out over the last 6 years. So now I'm able just to focus on, I communicate to the customers. So
sure.
how do I communicate to the customers? I'm doing that through social. I'm doing that through retention. I'm doing that through paid ads. And then with SendLane, I'm kind of helping them, with, their narrative, but also this next level product that we're working on that is also just based around communication. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I look at it through that lens, it's easier for me to kind of like work across different verticals, because the learnings of Fresh Chili support SendLane, and the learnings of the agency support Fresh Chili, and they all sort of just kind of run together now, which is,
Mm.
for the first time in my life, I've never had that happen. But it's taken a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, a lot of failure to get here.
Absolutely. I want to double down on some comments
Yeah,
that you made. So you called out going through some periods of depression and
right.
some real adversity in
Yeah,
your building process.
right.
And it sounds like what you've been able to do is create really a uniform,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a better way to say it is transferable skills across
Yeah,
each one of the areas that you're playing in.
right,
And so for the builders that are going through that period, that chasm
right,
of depression, through the hard
yeah,
period of time,
right.
what's the advice that you would give to them to help pull themselves out? And maybe it's not a hack. Like, I don't think it's a hack, but it's
Yeah.
just, what was your experience, and how did you pull yourself out of that?
I don't know if it's a meme or like a post, but like I'd never forget this. But like it was a photo of someone walking,
Hmm.
and the post was like, if you ever see you ever see a guy who just walking just to be walking, he's going through it.
Hmm.
And it was a little bit more, savvier than that. But
Sure.
that's kind of it on some level. Like, I think we're so plugged in. We are so plugged in. I mean, we can't deny it. We are the most optimized generation of all time, most efficient generation of all time. We're about to create universal basic income, wealth, and all these things that are coming with AI. And so a lot of us who sort of like, oh, I got to make money, or I got to survive, I got to pay, bills, I got to, provide for my family. All that sort of coming to a head with AI in a lot of ways.
Hmm. Hmm.
So really the most valuable skill set that we can have is clarity in our thinking and our decisions.
Hmm.
And so when we unplug and we just sort of walk it out,
Hmm.
you're going to find a lot of clarity, not being, attached to your phone or to your watch or to, different things. And I think for me, everyone's a little bit different. You might be swimming, you might be hiking, but it is a disconnect, I believe.
Sure.
And understanding that we are ultimately decision makers, and that we need to be optimizing for clarity, and revenue and everything else we're looking for will actually follow.
Hmm. It's so funny, and I've spoken about this on previous podcasts
Hmm.
with other guests, and it's this narrative of, if you look at the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, and they've
Right,
all hustled and gone through their chasm
right,
and their periods of stress and everything
right,
else, and stress and depression.
right.
Who just retired? Warren Buffett. He him and Bezos, I've heard in multiple interviews talk about, I only need to make a few really critical decisions per year. And so, how do we spend our time? We spend our time reading, we spend our time thinking, we spend our time doing things that help feed our mind, to help position ourselves for the most strategic decision possible, to help
Right.
move the business forward. Now, one could argue maybe they have that ability to do that now because they've built the wealth and the structure and everything else. Um, but to what you just called out, clarity in an
Mm.
environment where there is a barrage of Slack messages, text messages, email, everything that's coming at us at all times,
Right.
is really the currency. And so I'm interested to understand how you how you create clarity for yourself. And I
Mhm.
know you alluded to walking it out. Is that the zone? Is it just leave everything at home and you walk for a couple hours a day? Like what? How do you do that?
I think it's a few things. I mean, like I said, the process is going to be different for everyone, and I think for me is like I do have that moment in the morning where I do have quiet time, and I do, I do some reading and I do some praying. The walking's important. I think exercise is crucial on top of walking.
Sure.
Some type of pushing yourself. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
something s- to getting out of breath every day that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I'm working towards trying to be more consistent with. It's like
Mm-hmm.
how do I just exhaust myself physically, even through sprints. I started doing like 10 sprints a day. I'm like, okay, just something
Nice.
that just feels like it's just wearing myself out, because we got to release those toxins. We have
Mm-hmm.
to release and create those endorphins. And so that's something. I think food is also something that I think we're about to go into this huge food revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in my line of work with Fresh Chile, I'm very cognizant of like gluten free, or dairy or all natural, or I'm becoming more aware of it, and also my nutrition. But I think too, to that point, it's like I just took a road trip with a few friends.
Mm-hmm.
Went to LA and back. Went to Monument Valley. Went to Zion National Park.
Mm-hmm.
Went to LA. Yeah, we did some working obviously as well, but just something about hitting the open road and being with people that you trust and that you can kind of talk things out through is also important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think clarity's a journey. But to your point, I do believe it's um, I am basically we are all basically being compensated for the decisions we make.
Mm-hmm. What I really appreciate about what you called out is you
Mhm.
shared your formula,
Mhm.
and I think there's a very real hustle culture out there. And
Right.
I've subscribed to it to myself, and I think that
Yeah.
hustling is a necessary,
Right.
like, you got to have multiple gears and you got to
You
be
gotta
willing to
have passion.
chase.
Yeah.
You got to have passion. And I think everyone has their own mode
Mhm.
of what I'll characterize as getting out the poison, right? It's like
Yeah.
you gotta move, you gotta go make connections, you gotta do X, Y, and Z. But I think it's less about I need a cold plunge. I need a journal. I need to read. I
Yeah.
need to like
Right.
to just what is going to help you get that release and
Right.
actually spending the time to identify and find out what that is,
Right.
because to your point, that's what gets you through the chasm. Like
Right.
you're going to go through the chasm at some point in time, and if you don't
Right.
have the systems and controls to help work you through that point in time, whether it's
Right.
exercise, family, food, connection, like all those
Right.
things,
Right.
you will burn out and you won't get to the mountaintop that you're aspiring towards. I really love the way that you structured that.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, again, it's kind of like a foundation of family, finances, fitness, focus, and faith. And I think like we all subscribe to those kind of five foundational pillars in some way, shape, or form. How we kind of achieve each one is going to be different, but I do believe it's around that foundation, and I think it's important. I think that was the thing that I needed to go through what I went through. I
Mm,
needed to be kind of pushed to the edge because it showed me where my value system was and the lack of value system that I had implemented in my own, you know, daily operating system, if you want to call it that.
mhm. So I was just listening to a podcast with Simon Sinek on it, and
Mhm.
he was talking about kind of the advent of AI, what's coming,
Yeah.
etc. And he does a really good job talking about leadership and how it connects.
Mhm.
And he's plugging in directly with the AI conversation.
Mhm.
And what he gets to is this notion that as we as we continue to lean into this tooling, we're actually losing exactly what you just spoke about, which is the pain that we experience along the way is
Right.
actually where the gold and the treasure is found and what
Right.
builds you into the character and the persona that you are.
Right.
And AI is facilitating very much an outcome focused society. We're already outcome
Right.
focused, but
Right.
now it's like you put in something and magic pops out and you get the
Right.
outcome that you're looking for.
Right.
And so we're almost continuing to shrink down that cycle. And I often, jokingly, but I often poke fun at some of the younger generation. It's like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. And I feel like every generation says that about the
Right.
generation before them
Right.
because there's been increased
Right.
cycles.
Right.
I've characterized them as like the 2 day delivery generation because they
Yeah.
want results in 2 days because they grew up with Amazon and
Right.
Netflix and all the other pleasantries out there. And
Hmm.
so it's interesting that you call out that the calluses are what you appreciate the most about going through that, and I also think it's probably beneficial for the listeners to hear that though you're going through this right now, and though it's hard to hear that these are the moments that you're going to reflect on and
Right.
realize this is what made you who you are. It's almost like you have to accept that for what it is, you know.
Yeah, there's a point, there's a breaking point where the only way out of it is to walk through it and is to sort of like do the work and get through it.
Mm,
Just like we've done, whether we played sports or entrepreneurship or whatever it is, we've learned those lessons along the way. But obviously, they become a lot harder when it's tied to finances and family and life, and that's the thing that there's not a playbook for how
mm-hmm,
kind of life happens. And a lot of times, our businesses, can be as good as we are in the place, and they kind of can be as bad as we are in the place that we're in, as
mm-hmm,
far as just the ups and downs of where we're at from a mental or physical state. So for me, it's learning how to. It's interesting that you asked this, but I'm learning how to invest in myself.
mm,
And that wasn't a again, I alluded to like a kind of a traumatic childhood, and I won't go into
sure.
too much detail, but extreme poverty, no running water, no electricity,
Mm,
rolling pennies for gas money, um, and basically, um, kind of abusive stepfather, a mother
mm,
who kind of just worked all the time, I think to sort of evade her marriage. And then, like, I turned 30 and my parents passed away. And so, like, for me, there was like, one, I didn't really have that structured upbringing of watching, a man provide for, as a
mm-hmm,
husband and as a father. And I really didn't get to kind of experience maybe what I needed in that relationship from my mother. And so I had to kind of build that foundation myself, and I think that's why I'm so
mm,
personal about it, and openly willing to share about it, because I think there's a lot of other people, especially in this generation. You can call it a fatherless generation, whatever you want to call it,
mm-hmm,
where like the foundation's a little shaky.
mm-hmm,
And what does that foundation look like? And it's just sort of like structuring kind of around certain pillars of which you can build upon.
mm-hmm. First and foremost, I appreciate you being so authentic and
Hmm.
sharing some of the things that you have gone through,
Hmm.
and uh, I think I think the interesting piece behind all of that is
Right.
it shaped you into who you are today. Just
Right.
like you called out the chasm of depression, some of the things you had to work through,
Right.
you wouldn't be who you are without that. And
Right.
so, like looking back on some of those experiences, you
Mhm.
talked about some pillars, some foundational values that you've been able to hone as your own core brand, but
Right.
also probably what, and I might be, this might be presumptuous, but call me out here,
Mhm.
translates into the pillars and the foundation of Fresh Chile as well
Right.
too. And so it's like your adversity enabled Fresh Chile to be what it is today
Mhm.
and enabled your family to be what it is today.
Mhm.
So maybe you could talk us through a little bit about what those pillars are and how you structured those.
Yeah, I mean that's a great call out, and I think too, like when I look at kind of running a strategy, I kind of look at three core principles. I look at consistency. Again, that excludes like 99% of people for just being completely honest. Communication, communication's multifaceted, but communication is important, and creativity. And when I talk about creativity, I'm not talking about. A lot of people kind of get intimidated by it, but it's more of like I would say more like problem solving.
Hmm.
Just really trying to solve a problem. Like there's a lot of creativity in accounting and um, customer service, and there's a lot of creativity in those things, and people don't think of creativity in that way, but it's really truly like just being a really great problem solver. So as I break those down, when we talk about like how do we kind of put this together for Fresh Chili, is I actually don't run a marketing playbook anymore. I used to be
Hmm.
the guy who give you 30 days, 6 months, annual, here we go. This is what we're doing, right? Like that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah.
Because especially when you think about like Shopify brands and how they're structured, and I've thought a lot about this. We basically all have Shopify stores and Shopify products, and we all follow the same framework. So
Hmm.
say that the average Shopify store has about 20 products. Every one of those product pages has 10 core principles. You got product images, and they talk about like testimonials, they talk about benefits, they talk about ingredients or the materials of how it's made. It talks about value, the best case use for, has some pretty evergreen creative in it as well. And it's also embedded with a lot of reviews from customers that you can kind of use to find differentiating angles. And so when you think about that foundation, what I started to do, especially at the beginning of this year, is we're posting about 7 to 8 times a day on Facebook,
Sure.
and I am posting through each one of those angles by
Hmm.
product. And so every day we feature a product, and we feature 7 or 8 different of those angles, and then we repeat the next day, and we just cycle through all 50 plus of our products.
Hmm.
Our Instagram has doubled. You know, we're up 88% over last year. Not necessarily doing due to that strategy alone, but it also helps our top of funnel education, which I think is really missing with a lot of Shopify e-commerce brands. And so like that
Hmm.
consistency of showing up and communicating kind of your message and your value proposition. And where the creativity kind of comes in for us is like behind the scenes at the farm, live videos,
Hmm.
giveaways, products, drops and promotions. I think that's sort of the secret sauce for us.
It's interesting you call that, and actually something I noticed as you were talking. So you talked about some of your core foundational things that have gotten you through
Yeah.
certain situations.
Right.
There were the 5 Fs. Now you have the 3 Cs. I see you're very good at packaging up some of those narratives so that they're easy to remember. But I think the coolest thing about the pillars, as the way that you describe them,
Yeah.
is really those are the skills that you would need if you're in a situation to with what I will characterize from what I heard, absentee parents, right? You need to be creative. You
Mm-hmm.
need to be able to communicate around with the people that are around you in some of the day-to-day activities.
Right.
And you need to have remind me what the final C was.
Uh, so you got consistency, communication, and
And,
creativity.
and you need to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was going with it. You need to be consistent
Mm-hmm.
with the way you show up day in and day out, because you're trying to fill a void that you maybe didn't have in some of the day to day. So maybe I'm reaching, and you tell me if I'm off base, but it's very cool that you've been able to translate that into your brand.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that, but that system was developed when, I lost my parents. And so it's like
Mm,
I had to create a foundation, and I didn't know I was creating a foundation. But what's really great is like, as you see in business, those are so foundational. Like you
absolutely.
can be in the top 1% if you just do those things.
Hmm.
And that's, yeah, I think going back to like AI agents and AI things, I think like AI is solving, like you were saying, kind of the best possible outcome for a lot of people, but
Hmm.
it's not solving the consistency for humans. Humans are still
Mm,
struggling with consistent actions, and AI is helping automate some of those processes for them. but it's not going to optimize your health. It's not going to optimize things that you need to be consistent at. And so I think there's still a lot of value in just in kind of developing, pillar system or foundation surrounded by values um, that really help you show up every day.
Absolutely. How have you seen your team, like how have you gone about inserting this mindset
Hmm.
into your team and ensuring that they are living into the same value chain that you've called out?
Yeah, I think internally, like it's sort of like as a leader, it's been sort of innate in the sense of like, hey, Chris really shows up every day. He's consistent, doesn't take days off. He's always constantly communicating, what our angles are, what our story is. But I think, you know, this journey of sort of like posting every day online has kind of forced me as well to think about how to carry that out. And and I think what it's important to kind of realize is just that what you're trying to achieve,
Hmm.
what outcome are you trying to have, and what mission are you trying to live out, and so in each one of these kind of like scenarios, it's always good, the mission's going to be different from the company wide to the department. And so I think, and sorry, I just was having this thought as you were having me explain this, but like sort of like, what is the kind of the mission here of what we're doing. And I think that's what's great is I had a conversation just earlier today, with someone who we're growing fast.
Hmm.
They needed some clarity, and we're here to help people tell their story.
Hmm.
And so it just you could just see that moment of like, you're right,
Hmm.
you're right. We're here to help tell the story. So all of a sudden now we become problem solvers. Now that creativity comes in because okay, what is keeping us as a bottleneck from telling that story, and how do we kind of remove that? Because people kind of always said like, I'm one of the best people to work for and one of the worst, and it's the reason is because I will take away every excuse you have. I
Hmm.
will give you every resource you need to be successful. So that's sort of like people either do really well with that method, or they're kind of like, oh, I'm kind of full of BS, and they kind of fizzle
Yep.
out, right? And so, just to that, just understanding what the mission is, and for Fresh Chili, it's really bringing people together. It's about bringing family and friends together over their favorite recipes.
Hmm. I love that. I really love that. And it ties back to where we started with this conversation,
Mhm.
which is this narrative of a family baked recipe from the beginning that
Mhm.
you've been able to scale up over time, and staying
Mhm.
true to that, I think is spot on. And I'm sure that that's the same narrative that you guys take when you're looking at your advertising and
Mhm.
all the other structure there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I wanted to ask you, as we get closer to wrapping up today's conversation. Um, there was a tweet that I saw that I thought was really interesting, that I think some of our listeners might benefit in hearing
Yeah.
some of your thoughts around. And so I'm going to quickly read it for the listeners, and we can just kind of talk about how you landed there, and how you work through some of those things.
Cool.
So the tweet is: realizing my biggest bottleneck is me. Last year's playbook won't cut it now. I'm uncomfortable growing, learning to communicate better, letting go of ego, showing up more consistently. There's one of the C's. And it's hard, but it's necessary. So talk to me a little bit about that aha moment, that realization, because I know so many founders deal with this, and
Mhm.
often don't even realize that they're the bottleneck of the
Mhm.
business.
Mhm.
Maybe just talk us through how you landed there.
Yeah. I think sort of this interesting perspective of having insight where on the agency I deal with clients and brand owners, very successful brand owners who will do hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Sure.
And then myself as a founder who's building currently, still building.
Hmm.
And then like on kind of the software side where they're very much kind of like an agency in a sense. They're trying to advocate for clients, and clients think they need XYZ. And I was kind of sitting there solving problems for each of this. And I was talking about, hey, this client, they really need to have this realization. And then I realized the client was acting just like I acted at Fresh Chile. And I was like, damn it. And it's just kind of like a kick in the pants, and you're just like, all right, a little bit of self-awareness here, like a little moment of truth. And so again, going back to that clarity, what's been really cool is I found this kind of renewed enthusiasm and kind of excitedness to be like, oh, that's the problem I'm trying to solve for right now. And I'll be very clear what the problem I'm trying to solve is. I believe everyone has a story, and I'm
Hmm.
trying to unlock communication, digitally for them to
Hmm.
tell their story, whether it's a personal or on the brand side. Like I feel like everyone has a story, and we're going into the most important part of human history where story is going to be kind of the utmost of importance.
Sure.
And so like I'm very like, just excited to sort of kind of work through that framework and develop those systems, and really kind of unpack what that looks like and test things out, and put it back together, and hopefully kind of create a playbook that kind of helps people. But I realized that in doing that, I think people have the biggest problem telling their story.
Hmm.
It's like that bottleneck is like, it's like the hairdresser who has bad hair, the mechanic whose car is not running. It's all the
Yeah.
things, right? And so I think it was just sort of like, I need to go on a walk.
Back to the walking again. Full circle. Full circle. Love the connection there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's maybe some sprints in there too. Maybe
yeah,
some sprints
exactly,
in there too.
exactly.
There you go. Get your 10 in. No, it's funny. It's funny you call that out, and I love the analogies: the hairdresser, the mechanic,
Mhm,
etc. Um, how would you recommend people come to that realization?
mhm,
And because I mean, I'm going to venture to say that more founders than not that I've interacted with are the bottleneck, whether they really realize it or not. And
mhm.
so, and often their people are telling them that, but they're like, no, 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 they're just they're doing their thing, they're running. So how would you, if you were to give advice to your past self,
Mhm.
what what would you share in terms of how to work through something like that?
It's it's a control issue that we have,
Hmm.
right? Like, a lot of like founders, brand owners, they kind of see a solution, and it's
Hmm.
like, hey, we want to provide a solution. And so there's a lot of control over how that's sort of being played out. And to provide some, you know, a solid answer on that would be very hard, if I'm being honest. But I think
Sure.
what would be good practicality is find out what you're obsessing over, the problem you want to optimize for, and then kind of focus on that. So some brand owners are really good at sales. Some are really good at product development. Some are really great at customer service. And I would say optimize for that. And for me, it's story.
Hmm.
It's story and communication, right? So like that's what I'm optimizing for. And now it's just like find the best people, and retention and paid, and you know CX, and all these different roles, because you know it's a as you kind of grow and you kind of need these people. You can't do it yourself, and you gotta learn to let them run with it. But I will also kind of just say this too, as something that I've always had to learn, is like have audits along the way. you
Sure.
know have those feedback loops, because you want to give people autonomy and the
Hmm.
ability to be creative, but you need to check in with them at least every quarter, and just not make sure they're dropping the ball or something's going on in their life, or we've seen it all. And I think just keeping a pulse on it. I would say, you know, I don't know what we're fleshing out here, but it's sort of let go, but keep a pulse on it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think that's what I'm sort of working through myself.
Well, what I like about that is what I heard is a couple things. So
Yeah.
one is find your zone of genius
Right.
and just lean into it
Right.
and relentlessly lean into it.
Right.
And where you have the funds and the ability to say, you know what, this is not my thing, don't keep trying to do it. Hand it off to where it's someone else's zone of genius. You're going to be a lot happier,
Right.
and someone's going to do it a lot better
That's
than
true.
if you were trying to lean in and do it yourself. So I think that's a really really interesting call out. And then in terms of the audit piece, which I think it's like what I'm hearing you get at is like be willing to give up control, but also have a mechanism of validation so that you know that the system is continuing to run and
Yeah.
maintain
Track.
itself. And often that, sorry, I cut you off.
No, no. I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just saying track the metrics. I was just agreeing
And
with.
and that goes back to kind of where you started off earlier in terms of how you've been able to manage and you're
Yeah.
building in public, etc.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting part about that is I think most founders either err on two sides of the spectrum. Either you're hyper control and
Mhm.
you're in the shit and you don't want to give up and you don't fully trust people. The
Right.
other side is I don't want to be a micromanager because I don't like to be micromanaged. I'm going to assume everyone else is just doing their shit and I'm going to let them do their thing.
Right.
Those are the two polar sides of the spectrum.
Right.
And I think the audit strategy is a very effective one that I've seen
Mhm.
because we all watch games. I shouldn't say we all,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
many people watch sporting events
Yes, of course.
for a reason because there's a scoreboard
Yeah.
that we all want to be able to monitor and see how things
Right.
are progressing.
Right.
And underneath the scoreboard, there's a bunch of stats that the analysts and everyone's talking about, whether it's rebounds or free throw percentage or
Right.
whatever your sport is. There's a million metrics out there
Right.
to follow. And so if you don't look at those metrics, and if we play a game without a scoreboard, it's almost like there's no point in watching. And I'm not saying that's the whole purpose of it, but that helps create the accountability to
Right.
maintain momentum towards winning the overall game that we're aspiring towards winning.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Um, there's one other thought I wanted to bring up before we get ready to break. You've talked a little bit about advice. You talked about scaling a business, some of your core principles and values. What are you excited about? So obviously there's a whole world of AI. There's other tools. You got a big team. You got multiple projects you're working on. What are you most excited about looking into the remainder of 2025 and beyond?
Mm, that's a great question. I actually was just talking to um, someone today who kind of he's our creative director for our agency, and I actually I was like I haven't told him this, so you guys will be the first one to know. But I was like, you know, I think I want to make him our story director,
Hmm.
and it's because like the conversation we had is about what we're doing for the next 5 or 10 years, and I think that's really about helping people tell their story, helping
Hmm.
people share their story, and that's given me a lot of hope and understand like everything that I went through had a purpose and has a purpose, and I can just take what was meant, what I thought was meant, for pain and heartache, and just meant to really be more for helping people, healing, and optimizing for a life that's surrounded by family and friends.
I love that. I I don't think you could have said it any better, Chris. And what I'm leaving this call with is, and this is what you would hope for in every story. The
Mm-hmm.
word that just is ringing in the back of my mind
Mm-hmm.
is authenticity. And I appreciate you being you and telling your story because I think it's going to unlock so many things for so many other founders in terms of working through the adversity and some of the day-to-day struggles that they're pushing through, and making it to that other side of success that all of us are aspiring to achieve. So thank you so much for joining the Scaling Paradox today. I hope to have you on for future topics,
Yeah, definitely.
and look forward to hosting you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Scaling Paradox. If this helped cut through the chaos, please send it to another founder or operator that's stuck in it too. If you haven't subscribed yet, let's fix that. New episodes of the Scaling Paradox drop every other Thursday. There's no filler in this podcast, just the real work of scaling past yourself.